What is going on, Clippers fans? It is me, William Updike, here with Clips and Dip. We're coming at you, season 3, episode 47. I hope that's right. If you didn't notice, Charles isn't here, but we're going to talk about the Clippers putting away a couple of good wins after we were worried about them limping into the All-Star break. We're going to talk about the new additions in Bogey and Ben Simmons, and then just talk a little bit about the All-Star break, who needs this rest the most, what we want to see from the Clippers coming out of the All-Star break, and we're going to look a little bit at their schedule, too, which is a little grueling if you're looking at it. I'm joined by Adam Oslin. Adam, I see you're in your car. It's a beautiful day. How are you doing, man?
Speaking of things looking grueling, no, it is a beautiful day out, so I thought I'd pod from the car. I'm excited to talk Clippers here. It is day 2 of the All-Star break. Norman Powell's in the three-point contest tonight, but we got to review what's been happening over the past week and just, going from losing 3 games in a row to winning 3 games in a row heading into the All-Star break.
Yeah, it's quite the change of fate. Well, let's talk about this because we a couple of good wins here. Big win over the jawless Grizzlies, 128 to 114. Kawhi, I think, was probably most notable in this one. He came out with 25, 5, and 4. Not as efficient as we're used to, but I think if you go back and look at all the shots that he took, it's very much like the Kawhi kind of highlight reel. He's getting to his normal spots. He seems to be moving. He seems to be moving really, really well. We talked in our the last time all three of us were together about some of the concerns about Kawhi. Did this do anything to assuage any of your fears? What were you seeing from the Claw on this one?
Wait, is this a Saj or a Swage? Because I've been saying a Swage forever, so am I a dumbass here?
I don't know. You're asking the wrong person.
Well, I did think it was a good performance by Kawhi. It did quell some of my fears because the 3 days off were significant. You wanted to see how he looked after 3 days off after he'd been playing every other day for 18 days. So it kind of told us he was a little bit gassed out there because he was moving noticeably different against the Memphis Grizzlies. And I'll say this, I think he missed his first 3 shots. So what was he, 9 for 16 or something like that after that? So he kind of got some misses out of his system early. He got a lot of good looks that still just didn't fall for him. But it's all about the movement, the gait. Does he look like he's fluid out there? And I think Kawhi Leonard, yeah, he put a lot of that stuff to rest. And that's all I wanted to see. That was huge.
He finally hit that three, and then he ended out his first shift there on kind of a little heater. And yeah, so he definitely got the misses out of his system early. What about from the defensive end? Are you feeling? And it is a swage, by the way. I'm the dumbass, not you.
It could probably go both ways, right? Tomato, tomato.
I don't know. I'm probably wrong here, but go ahead and get at us, pronunciation enthusiasts in the chat. What defensively? Because I feel like that was your bigger concern, really, right? Like, despite some of the offensive struggles, you thought the way he was moving defensively looked notably different. You bring up the fatigue. What were you seeing in this one? Is he looking better on both ends of the floor?
Yeah, I thought he looked pretty good defensively. There was still some rotations and little things that if you're nitpicking and focusing in on one guy, you might see that with anyone, even some of the best defenders in their prime right now. I still think Kawhi, and it was interesting, Law Murray asked him post-game about how would you grade yourself defensively, and Kawhi kind of threw it back at him and then talked about how, I'm still learning Jeff Van Gundy's system. It's a process right now. But I think overall, like, all the numbers say they are much better with him on the floor, not just offensively, where they're like 10 points per 100 possessions better, but even on the defensive end. So,
Mind
I,
blowing, mind blowing stuff that they
yeah, yeah, better with Kawhi
lie
Leonard.
on the floor.
Some people were still skeptical that, well, they're so good defensively this season, any drop off could be problematic. But Kawhi, he only strengthens strengths for you. So as long as he's moving well out there, and I think this is more about a conditioning thing, him just having more of his win because the minutes have been going up while he was playing more games. So it was very understandable that it could only be, or that it very likely would be just him not having the gas in the tank. And then he had more after 3 days off. So for me, that's all I needed to see.
I think especially with like losing all the weight, I think there was bound to be a bit of an adjustment period there too, because like your stamina and everything is different. Overall, I think it's great. I love that he's like the leanest we've seen him in years, but I do think that there might have been a very real and it could still be ongoing, like sort of an issue with some of the stamina stuff.
That's a good point because just because you are leaner doesn't necessarily mean you have better cardio. Like you're changing your diet, you're eating less calories, your body does have to adjust to that. As someone who once attempted to get to 10% body fat before the Clippers season started, I know a little bit about this.
Did you put that one to bed? Is that over now?
It's over until I hit my mark that I'm gonna be like, I made it, I did it. And a span of it'll be some awkward goal. Like I was just trying to do it within like a 2-year stretch. So I finally got there. I met my goal. You guys didn't know what my goal was.
Clippers, Western Conference Finals appearance or 10% body fat?
Why can't it be both? Probably with the way I've been eating the last couple of weeks, I've been in a bad place basically since Christmas. So Clippers Western Conference Finals appearance. I'll go there. More
Okay.
likely.
All right. So we got to talk about Chris Dunn. He was back in the starting lineup in this one. He was tied with Kawhi for a team best plus 25 in those minutes. 14, 3, and 5 on some nuts shooting splits. 83% from the field, 100% from three. I'm curious what you thought. Like, is this a return to form for him? We've talked so many times on this show, I feel like, about the law of averages. Like, yes, he's a low 30s shooter. And so that means that he's going to have stretches where he goes, what did he go at 1.1 for 21 or something like that? And then he'll have like a 100% night performance to boost this up. What did you think of him being back in the starting lineup? Are you a fan still of this rotating thing? And could this be a step in the right direction for Chris Dunn? Like, is he getting to where we need him to be?
I mean, for a second, I thought they were very quietly phasing out the rotating positional thing with him and DJ in
You
the
would
starting
hope,
lineup.
though, too, right?
Yeah, but I did say initially if there are two guys who can make this work, because DJ was really good off the bench in that game, it is DJ and Chris Dunn because they're willing to sacrifice because they do the little things out there. And I don't know, they just seem to play hard no matter what their role is. I was happy to see him because I think going into that performance where he was 4 of 4 from 3 against Memphis, Chris Dunn was 2 for his last 23 from the outside. And I ran the numbers after the game, and just going 4 of 4 in one game from 3 raised his 3-point percentage from 30% to 32% on the season.
Let's go.
So, law of averages, baby. He's back where he's at as a career shooter, basically from 3. Now, he went 0 of 1 against Utah the very next game, but obviously not high volume there. I just felt like even aside from the 3-point shooting, and maybe that played into his overall game because he's knocking down shots, he's even more confident out there. But the 5 steals, he was so disruptive, and it did make sense to play him even against a Ja-less team. They said pregame he was going to be the starter, so when they found out Ja wasn't going to be in the starting lineup or playing for the Memphis Grizzlies, it wasn't like they were going to go, okay, we're going back to DJ now 20 minutes before the game starts. They were going to stick with that. But that does make sense to play him against a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, to have him back in the starting lineup, and it played out that way. So I don't know. I guess I can't knock it until there's a decent sample size of it not working when they're rotating him and DJ, who, again, DJ, very good off the bench, his first time in a while, and he looked good.
Yeah, absolutely. Another guy I want to give a shout out to, Amir Coffey, had like a great offensive outpouring in this one. 14 points. He got to the line 7 times and shot 100% from there. So that was great to see. Also, pretty good debut from Bogdan. We're not going to go too into depth about this right now because I want to talk in the next segment a little bit more about what we've seen from the new guys so far. But let's move on to this overtime thriller versus the Jazz. Clippers pulled this one out in overtime. They were down 20 points, ended up winning that one 120 to 116. I mean, the highlight of this game has got to just be the offensive heroics of Norm and Harden, right? Harden finished with 32 in this one, and Norm had 41, shooting 50% from the floor. What was it like? Was it just back against the wall and need a win before the All-Star break? Like, what? This is the best dual like offensive outing we've seen from both of them together in a while. What were you seeing there? Is this replicable?
Hey, not to mention the offensive heroics of Ben Simmons, doubling his
We're
season
gonna get
average
to
of
it.
6
We're
to
gonna
12.
get to it. I said the highlight.
Okay, James Harden playing 50 minutes, basically, on the second night of a back-to-back is just insane, and waving off the coach, trying to bring him out of the ball game. He plays the entire second half into overtime. He is a badass. He's an absolute tank. He is one of the more reliable players at this age in an NBA career that we've ever seen, just taking on
I
the
don't get
minutes
how you can
load.
have a problem with this guy. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like he has such a bad reputation, like as a teammate and like player and worker. And I feel like it's one of those bizarre narratives where, like, if you've ever had him on your team, the man is trying to play as many positions in every single possible game.
And, maybe late bloomer when it comes to maturity, and maybe some of those issues were real, but give him credit because he's been awesome as a Clipper. All I care about is how he's played with this organization. I'm not worried about whatever perceived baggage there was before because he has been perfect for them this season, especially starting with the offseason workouts. He held them privately in Arizona, getting all the guys together, and then just leading by example on the court. Uh, Making sure that he is still the system with having that responsibility of having to score out there while also setting up everyone. But that game just epitomized him being the MVP of this team this season. There are a lot of guys who've been great. You can make the argument for Norm. You can make the argument for Ivica Zubats, but I'm still going with James Harden. Even though the efficiency numbers haven't been there as much, when you look at somebody in his mid-30s doing as much as he is tasked with, I just feel like everything else is more reliant on James Harden than he is on those other variables and factors and players out there. It starts with James Harden. And for him to have those 10 points in the fourth quarter after they were down by 9 heading into the fourth quarter, they don't get into overtime without him. Big shots. And I don't know. I just, him pulling them through, and Norman Powell, obviously, in overtime, really pulling them through at the very end. That was one of the best performances of the season, easily, even against Utah. I mean, the Lakers had just lost to them the night before in Utah. That they easily could have had a foot out the door. They could have said, "Hey, we just beat this team by 20 back at Intuit Dome last Saturday, less than a week ago." They didn't have a letdown. I don't know. How'd you feel about that one and where it ranks on the season, Will? Because I thought that was one of the best victories.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're getting a 20-point comeback, especially for a team like this that struggles so much offensively, it's a massive win. The all-around performance from James was nuts because he still added 10 assists and 7 boards to to the scoring there. And I think, like, to me, it's almost even more impressive because, as you brought up, the minutes load and the second night of a back-to-back, where in the first night against the Grizzlies, it's not like Harden and Powell were non-factors, dude, just relatively quiet nights for
Yeah.
both of them. So knowing that you're coming into a long break, like it's like you said, it'd just be very easy to check out. It'd be very easy to have one foot out the door. And even as like a fan and someone who covers this team all the time, I'd be like, it's kind of understandable, it's the last game before the break, but for them to like really put their foot on the gas to get this one out, I mean, it's a huge win. And a huge thing I just think that we were all concerned about was limping into the All-Star break. Like, it's just not a good look. It's not a good feeling. And for them to go into the All-Star break with a 3-game winning streak is just drastically kind of different than where I thought we might be, say, a week ago.
Yeah, and so many people after the 3-game losing streak were saying, "Oh, we didn't do enough at the trade deadline. This team is running out of gas. They're cooked. This is that turning point. Maybe Kawhi's not helping. He's actually hurting this team." All the sky is falling stuff I had heard has been put to bed now because of the way they played the last 3 games. Even when they weren't their best, they still found ways to win because they're down 20 in the first half. I think it was 50-30 in that game in Utah. Then they're down 16 with 4 minutes left in the third quarter. They had every reason to say, it's not our night. It's not going to happen. Unfortunately, we are hitting the wall at the wrong time right before the All-Star break. And instead, they say, no, we're going to gut this one out. We're just going to find a way to win. I think in past years, they lose a game like that. So it showed their will. It showed their mental toughness out there.
So great couple of wins for the Clippers. Great to go into the All-Star break on a 3-game win streak. Coming up next, we're going to talk the new additions in Bogey and Ben Simmons. So yeah, there's going to be a quick ad coming up if you're listening on audio. If you're watching, hey, we'll just still be here. So ad coming up in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back in. It's Clips and Dip, Season 3, Episode 47. I'm Adam Moslin. We got Will Updike, no Chuck Mockler, but a lot to get into with these new Clippers here.
First, you
Bo,
gotta address things are gonna look different.
what do you mean?
Where are you? What happened? Your car turned into a studio.
I
You
just
gotta you
changed the
got
green screen.
the Optimus Prime over there inside the car.
Autobots transform and roll out. Yeah, I had to go into work because I was having some connectivity issues here with my G-damn phone and the hotspot I was using that was very much ineffective. So I came into the office. We are back on. This is how hard we work for you guys to make sure you got a new episode of Clips and Dip. Let's talk about some hard-working new Clippers here. First, Bogey. He's played 2 games, been just one against the Utah Jazz, but Bogdanović, your early takeaways from one of your newest Clippers here, Will.
I thought offensively he looked really good versus the Grizzlies. I believe he was a team worst -10. But I'd have to go back and look at those lineups and what was going on there. But he is incredibly efficient. 75% from the floor, 50% from three. Looked really comfortable and confident. Honestly, similar numbers against the Jazz, 7-1-2. So he's like basically identical. The shooting splits from this looked a lot worse. He was 3 of 10 from the floor, just 1 of 6 from three. He did add 3 steals in that one, which I think is something interesting to think about, is like how he's going to fit into the defensive plan for everything. I guess the shooting thing, I feel like we've talked about this with the other Clippers before. Like it's been so bad this season. Then again, back to the law of averages. I have no choice but to believe that it's going to be better. I just don't think that it's going to continue at the rate that it has all season long. But I think that just having another guy out there who you have to respect on the floor, and I think even in his current shooting slump on the season, I don't think that most defenses are playing to his averages. I still think they're, depending on who was on the floor, obviously, but they're still going to respect him as a shooter. And we just need another guy who can kind of move around off ball and just kind of open things up a little bit more. What have you seen so far? What do you think about the shooting splits? And then how do you think he fits into this defensive identity for the Clippers?
Yeah, I don't put a ton into him only shooting 30% from the outside with Atlanta this season because he only took 146 threes. Like the year before, he took 641.
Oh, holy
So
crap.
we're talking about a guy who typically is at a much higher volume than this. And I just don't think it's obviously not indicative of who he's been throughout his career. He's a 38% right on the dot, 3-point shooter, his career average. I think maybe he won't get back to there. Maybe he'll only be 37% or 36%, but he's not going to shoot 30% the rest of the season with the Clippers, I don't believe, as long as he gets a healthy amount of 3 balls up. And his first shot, his first make with the Clippers was a 3 on like a slip screen on, I think, the right wing in that game against Memphis off a pass maybe from James Harden. But I've liked the activity. I've liked the movement. I've always liked the player. And I think this Clippers team has had a need there because their 3-point shooting was way down over like a 15-game stretch. They were shooting 33% from the outside. Now, over the last 10, they're shooting almost 37% from 3. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with Kawhi Leonard being out there and not necessarily what he's been shooting from 3, but the gravity, the spacing, all that stuff helps. And I think Bogey can help in those areas too. He's another floor spacer. And even though he wasn't knocking down shots at a high rate against Utah, he was one of the guys. It was between him and Chris Dunn rotating out in that game late against the Utah Jazz. So Coach Lue already trusts him as he should. He's a vet. I'm a big Bogey Ball fan, so I'm expecting good things with him in a Clippers uniform.
Yeah, and then this segues into the other addition, Ben Simmons, who through one game I think is overachieved even for the Ben Simmons optimists. I think
Even for you?
yeah, even for me, yeah, he played 27 minutes in his first game as a Clipper, finished with 12, 7, and 6, added 3 steals and a block. He was 4 of 5 from the floor, and I think the thing that's like most significant to me is I loved the shot profile. Like I loved where they were getting him. He got to the rim a couple of times on his own, which was great to see that sort of like athleticism is still there, and just like the confidence and drive, because I do think I do think the confidence and like the mental game was took a huge step back for him. Obviously, having a back injury and that sort of stuff being so sort of mercurial and up in the air doesn't ever help. But seeing him confident to get to the rim, I thought was great. I loved, I believe his first made bucket as a Clipper was an oop from James Harden, wherein he kind of, a 7-foot man, kind of snuck behind the defense. If you go back and look at the clip, he's literally like kind of crouched down, like literally like slow creeping towards the rim behind the defense. And I think that is going to play as a huge Clippers strength. Defenses are going to ignore him. That'll change, obviously, in the playoffs. That'll change if he continues to perform the way he does. But it is going to be a very real thing where he is not going to be watched as much, especially off ball. And I think that, obviously, he's not going to be a shooter. I'm not expecting anything like that from him. But just him being able to get those sort of cuts, him being able to get behind a defense, I think is great. We also saw him used in sort of the short roll, how they kind of use Zoo. And he had those, he had a couple of little nice shots there. So I'm loving the shot profile. I'm loving the athleticism and his ability to sort of push the ball. This was better than I expected. I'm wondering, is this too good too soon? Are we? Because I think that we're bound to be. There's going to be a stretch of Ben Simmons games. I think it was a law that said that used the word patience. I think it's one of those things that Clippers fans might have to exercise some patience with through some stretches. What are you seeing so far? What do you think is the ceiling for Ben Simmons on this team?
Honestly, a performance like that, he may have peaked in game one. No, I think he has more of those in him, but it's not going to be like that all the time is my point. He's going to have some
If he does,
games.
this team is like in a different stratosphere.
Yeah.
Like I'll just say that. Like I don't expect that. But to be fair, if you did or could, it puts this team in like an entirely different stratosphere.
Well, I do think he adds another dimension. I don't know if they win that game without him against the Utah Jazz because they went small. What was interesting was he was playing the 4 on defense, but the 5 on offense, the point center on offense, while still not guarding the biggest guy out there. That was Nico Batum playing the 5 defensively. They just have so many ways to match up now if they can unlock the best version of Ben Simmons. And you talk about his confidence. He had that steal where he took it the other way for a layup. And I thought when he got it, he was going to wait for the cavalry to arrive and dish it off and give it to somebody else to finish. Instead, he did. And I think he fell to the floor. It was a tough layup in transition.
That could have been an and one.
Yeah, that easily could have been a foul there. He's still getting no respect from the officials, but it's one game. This is somebody who I don't know. I have high hopes for because it would just be cool to see another guy who has a resurgence as a Clipper. And it's all there in front of him for this to happen in a Clippers uniform. Like, I really do believe in his skill set. And as long as he has confidence, the mental game is there from him. And that support system with the Clippers, I think, is very important. This is, the best place he's been culture-wise ever in his NBA career. Like, it's laughable to me that people still hold him accountable for some of the stuff in Philly. It's like, well, wait a second. Ben Simmons has been gone for a while, guys. It still seems like they got issues there. I don't think it was him. Like, I'm not trying to point any fingers, but I think it's pretty obvious it wasn't Ben Simmons that was the problem.
And again, I don't want to point fingers. Yes, he had the opportunity for a layup that would have tied or given them the lead in that game they got eliminated in. But Joel Embiid has also he's never matched even his regular season production through a postseason. So there's a lot of issues there. I'm not going to point the blame. I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus. I'm not Doc Rivers here. But I do think, I'm curious your thoughts on this because we talked a little bit about the rotating lineup. With the additions of Ben Simmons and Bogdan, what do you think that does for Kris Dunn's spot in the rotation? Like, does that facilitate or necessitate a move for him to the starting lineup? If his 3-point shooting continues to be more of the 2 for 23 type of stretch we saw versus the 100% stretch that we saw, does that make it a little bit more difficult to have him on the floor in a second unit with these 2 other guys? What do you think this does for the Kris Dunn of it all?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it puts more of a necessity on him knocking down those shots from the outside because Ben Simmons, that's never been a part of his game. That's not going to be a part of his game.
Yeah.
So you already know going in. kind of where those two guys are when it comes to shooting. I'm trying to think how much they played together in those small ball lineups because I mentioned it was Bogey and Chris Dunn getting rotated in and out near the end of that ball game. I think Chris Dunn just needs to be somewhat of a threat because you can't have like it's going to happen at times. Coach Lou will try, as he did Ben Simmons next to Ivica Zubac. And I'm not saying that that was the entire reason. First of all, Ivica Zubac had a bad game and off game for him, but they went, I think, -5 in 3 minutes with those two on the floor next to one another. And then meanwhile, Ben Simmons was really good. I think was like a plus, I don't know, 14 and 16 minutes in the small ball lineups. It's not always going to be like that. But yeah, I'm looking at, okay, Nico Batum next to James Harden, next to Bogey, next to Ben Simmons, next to Chris Dunn. That lineup, so him next to Chris Dunn there in that specific configuration went -4 in 3 minutes in that game. So I'm trying to see how many minutes he actually played next to Chris Dunn, if that was the only stretch of him in the small ball unit. Yeah, you may not be able to play those guys next to one another. It's very possible here, Will. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world. You can't have two non-shooters like that don't. It's one thing if you have a guy who's a rim runner like Ivica Zubac even out there next to Ben Simmons. But what exactly, if Chris Dunn isn't shooting it well, going to be doing next to Ben Simmons out there?
Yeah, well, and then it just depends on who else is out there too, because then you can't play Kawhi out there. I feel like that gets like sort of his areas where he likes to operate so clogged, like it just puts a lot of defenders in areas where he likes to move. Yeah, I don't know, and it's different too because obviously there's still a fair amount of the regular season left, a little less than half. So we have some time to figure it out. It's much different to me in a playoff scenario because you're not going to see as many bench heavy lineups. Like there's always going to be, I would assume for the most part, there's going to be two of Norman Powell, Kawhi, and Harden on the floor at all times, or as
Yeah.
much as they possibly can. So that kind of changes things out a little bit, and you're really just at that point, you're really just leaning either Simmons or Zoo, I would imagine. I think we'd be past the point of trying to play them together at that point. So I think, my thing with Ben Simmons and why I was so high on the addition is like we just need another true sort of ball handler. I think that this team could always use more athleticism and size. And he certainly brings both of those things to the table. But the question was just like, can you surround him with enough shooting? And I think for the most part, the answer is yes. It just depends on what Chris Dunn looks like, and honestly, like Bogdan and his shooting and how that all works out is going to be a factor as well. The thing with Bogdan though that I think helps a little bit more is just his motion off ball and how comfortable he is moving without the ball. And I think that is a little bit more dynamic than Chris Dunn, wherein even if Bogdan isn't making those shots, like the motion and the activity still demands a little bit more respect from a defense.
And to be fair to the conversation surrounding Ben Simmons playing next to Chris Dunn, I brought up that -4 lineup, but there's another one that went +5 with Ben Simmons next to Chris Dunn with Nico Batum, James Harden, and Norman Powell instead of Bogey in this one. Now they played 9 minutes and they went +5. So how much of that is just, okay, James Harden was hot during that stretch, or Norman Powell, that's when he was cooking during that stretch. Can you put a lot into it? Fundamentally, it doesn't feel like you should be able to play Chris Dunn and Ben Simmons next to one another. But maybe it's if Ben Simmons is such a good passer and connector out there that he can be a hub on offense and keep the ball moving. And Chris Dunn is also a willing passer. They still can create open shots because they're not slowing down the ball movement. And maybe that's part of the theory that if you have both of them out there, but they're passing it well, and you got them next to Norm, Batum, and James Harden, like in that lineup, that was a +5 there. Maybe there is something. Maybe there are ways, and it's going to come down to matchup still. And you do have more guys that might be specialists with this Clippers team that you really have to be careful with how to use them. And Ben Simmons is another one of those guys.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to preface this by saying I'm not taking anything away from Zubac. Like what he's done this season, the body of work. We know that he should be demanding the minutes, should be demanding the shots. But when he's not on the floor, a front court of Nico and Ben is like really exciting to me, just in the way that, you have some shooting with Nico. You have two phenomenal passers, and guys who can, really get after it defensively. Still pretty switchable, even Nico at his age. So I think that is a really, really interesting front court if you can make it work. It depends on the sort of the machinations around it, but I think anytime you can't have Zoo on the floor, like that to me is like your best anecdote, or your best antidote to not having your your 1A big man on the floor.
Yeah, and this is playoff type stuff because I don't know, what did Batum end up playing in that game? 30 minutes? That's not something I want to see much moving forward outside of a few select games here and there, because I've been saying since the beginning of the season, you have to preserve Nico Batum because he can swing a playoff series for you, not just a game, but using him the right way in a playoff series with lineups like these can change everything. I still believe that's there in him, just like it was in the 2021 run for the Clippers, where he can be that impactful for them against certain teams. So I don't want to wear him down. I understand they're about to hit the All-Star break. It makes all the sense in the world to empty the tank in that game against Utah. So he played heavier minutes, but that is something I'll be monitoring.
Definitely. Definitely. All right. Before we move on to some All-Star break talk and the Clippers' upcoming schedule, do you have any other parting thoughts on Bogey or Ben?
I really think they brought in two guys that, first of all, the only reason they could get one of them is because he was bought out and is no longer a superstar that, will be making $40 million on his next contract, and Ben Simmons, and it was on a team that was tanking. And so they want to take away one of their better players so they can have a better chance for Cooper Flag. So very, very strange situation there. And then you have another unique situation with Bogey only playing 24 games. His shooting has been off, coming off a season where he might have had his best year just, less than a year ago, where he had 17 points per game, fifth and sixth
He
man.
finished top 5 in
Yeah.
sixth man of the year voting. So
I think he was right behind Norm. Like Norm was 4th and he was 5th. So the only reason you were able to get these two guys, it's not because, they were doing great and the Clippers had to give up so much for them. They really were able to get two guys with much higher upside because of unique circumstances going on right now. Like Lawrence Frank cooked with these two, because people have been talking about how, and I think you brought it up, Ben Simmons is two birds, one stone with him, because not only did they need a ball handler and a playmaker, they needed something else at the backup big position. He's not traditional big, but he can do some things there. And then Bogey was very much needed with his shooting with this team. I think they really, well, time will tell, but this could be one of, or two of the sneaky good moves of the trade deadline that are being a little bit overlooked just because of how those guys were currently, or the situations they were in and how they were currently playing. They're both better than what we've seen at those previous stops. And if the Clippers bring out the most in them, they might also swing a playoff game or turn a series around if used correctly, and if they're at the top of their game again with this Clippers team. I think they really made some interesting moves here at the trade deadline.
I agree 100%. And this is one of those moves that, given what the Clippers could do, or were willing to do, not even could do, but like we're willing to do. We know they weren't willing to empty the coffers. We know, that they don't want to take on a whole bunch of long-term money. And obviously they need to hold on to what few assets they have. This was the best case scenario. This was the best possible trade deadline that they could have had, given, what they want. And I think it's going to get overlooked, probably rightfully so, with some of the larger additions and movements across the league, because this was kind of an eventful trade deadline. But this isn't none of these aren't nothing moves for the Clippers.
Yeah.
Like this, we thought, we thought that we might just be looking at a consolidation move, like just sort of consolidating some of the players. I think that this team got, did more than consolidation. They got better theoretically. We still have to see how it all pans out, but were able to get better at the trade deadline without, giving up needed assets. Still a bummer to lose Terrence, but not giving up like super crucial assets, or having to sort of upend the team's identity that they've built so far through the season. So I think that this was like really, really great.
for what they gave up, basically, they might have gotten significantly better in a playoff series for what they gave up. Like
Yes.
it could turn out to be the case, but as you mentioned, we'll see.
We will see. So coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about the All-Star break and the Clippers' hellacious schedule coming out of there. Ad break coming up for audio. We'll still be right here for you on video if you're watching over at youtube.com/@ClippersPodcast. Ads coming up in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back in Clips and Dip. I'm Adam Moslem. We got Will Updike. Pour one out for Chuck Mockler. Valentine's Day weekend, whatever he's got going on. We're missing him right now, but we're pushing forward and we're looking ahead to what the post-All-Star break schedule is going to be for this Clippers team. First of all, when we're talking about who needs it most, I don't know if there's anywhere to look more than James Harden after just playing 50 minutes on the second night of back-to-back.
I agree.
Like, that was insane. Big Zoo also looked gassed in that game. And I think Kawhi Leonard, a little bit of a reset after playing every other day. I know he got 3 days off before the Memphis game. Could also
Which the difference was stark in how he looked on the floor.
So with the upcoming schedule with more back-to-backs, where he will get more rest because of that factor, they're not going to have another stretch where they play, I think, 9 games every other day the rest of the season. This could be big for him too. I don't know. Is there anybody we're missing here, Will?
No. I like that you brought Zoo into it too, because I feel like he's one of those guys who I think endures through a lot, and sometimes it shows on the floor. Like there have even been games this season where you can tell the way that he's moving physically, running up and down the court, that he's like definitely a little gassed. And I don't even mean to like I'm not even calling into question his overall conditioning or anything like that. I think it's like a cumulative knocks thing where he's an Iron Man and he's like trying to play through a lot of stuff. So I think that one's huge. James Harden is, the most obvious one. What he's done this season, we talked about it up top, but it is truly unique and incredible what a guy with both his age, but also his specific usage, what he's still doing is absurd. So I think the break will be good. I'm curious to see if there's like a little bit of a readjustment period for him, like if he has a couple of less than ideal games out of the gate, out of the All-Star break. But yeah, I think that those are the main ones. And I think that it could be big for Norm as well. And then obviously just getting a few practices in with these additions that we talked about last segment could be so huge for the Clippers. I think that it's big. And, maybe Chris Dunn can get some shots up.
Yeah, a few different guys need to Bull Durham, clear the mechanism a little bit when it comes to some shooting woes. I also wonder, is Kawhi going to step on the gas a little bit more coming out of the break?
Oh, that's a great point.
28 games left, something like that. Is he really going to show us something more? Because they've been going through these phases of him coming back. And at first it was like the preseason. He's playing 20 minutes, then 24, then 28, then 30, now 34. Are we going to see Kawhi now in a place where he's, as close as you can get to playoff Kawhi, ramped up regular season Kawhi, where he's got more of a green light to take over, to ISO, and we just see more burst out there generally. I think that game against Milwaukee, next Thursday, is going to be really interesting to watch Kawhi Leonard and see how he looks.
That's a great point too, because we talked about it when he first returned, how it was pretty clear that he was kind of playing with the governor on the offensive side of the floor. He wasn't, he wasn't quite as aggressive. And I think, looking at how much is left of the season, certainly looking at the standings, does give him a little bit more of a green light to sort of empty the tank and really go for these things. I like that you bring up the schedule, because the first game out of the break, we are taking on the Bucks, and then right after that, it's a 3-4 on the road with travel. You got the Pacers, Pistons, and the Bulls. And then it's back to LA, still technically away, still technically a visiting team for a doubleheader versus the Lakers. What are you expecting from the Clippers from this stretch? What do the Clippers need? Like, what's the most important thing for the Clippers coming out of this All-Star break, you think?
I mean, they got to win some games against the West, and if they could win both against the Lakers, that would be huge for the head-to-head tiebreaker going on. Like, that's it's imperative for them.
Is
Oh,
this
they
another situation where you're fine if they go 2-4 over this stretch as long as it's both wins against the Lakers?
no, not this close to the finish line. They need to win ball games. Like they probably let's see. If they want to be a top 6 seed, go 4-2. If you
Yeah,
want to be a top 6 seed in the Western Conference, go 4-2. And if 2 of those victories are against the Lakers, great. They have to, at worst, get the split against them. But
yeah.
I don't know if that's going to be enough because the Lakers, then it bumps the conference record and they have a much better conference record. I don't think it goes to Pac Div after head to head. I think it goes to conference record.
It's conference, yeah.
So, man, those 2 games are going to be massive and fascinating watches, of course, with the Lakers with Luka now. But I think 4-2 is what they need to do if they want to be a top 6 seed in the West because things are going to be too tight.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. Like I said, you worry about it. I mean, you worry about the rest, and it is kind of a lot coming out of the All-Star break, but hopefully with a week, they'll look a little bit better. Um, where where do you think what side of the ball do you think needs the most attention right now for the Clippers? Are you seeing the defense like sort of after a bit of a fall off? Are you seeing it snap back into place? What do you think offensively like that? Because that's where the team has struggled all season long. Are they in a little bit better place now?
I think they're figuring it out again defensively, and Chris Dunn getting back to playing his brand of basketball has been huge for them the last couple of games. Aside from those hot shooting against Memphis again, he just looked more like himself with the defensive effort there. And they've been generating turnovers again, which was something
Yes.
I was worried about for a while, where they just weren't doing something that is kind of a non-negotiable for
I
this
think
team.
21 versus the Grizzlies, something like that. It was a lot.
And they had 41 points off of turnovers, which may have been a franchise high since they tracked it in like 96 or something like that. It was an absurd number. And they got turnovers again against Utah. This is something they have to do. Almost 20% of their points in every game come off of turnovers. They're the second best team behind OKC with points off of turnovers. So defensively, I am feeling better after a stretch there where it just seemed like, yeah, they were tired, but they also wanted adhering to those defensive principles. Offensively, Coach Lue has been talking about almost like a reset with what they're going to be doing there and maybe getting back to basics or fundamentals of what Coach Lue always preaches. But it seems like they're trying to, I don't know, have a clean slate for the vets, the guys who've been there for a while, and then also the new guys, obviously. So everybody's kind of starting in the same place as they build up the offense. It almost sounded like a complete teardown, but I don't know if it can be that extreme this late into the season. And I don't think Coach Lue is completely changing what he's been doing forever offensively. And they're still going to lean into ISO with Kawhi and James Harden because they're top 2. Last season, they were the top 2 ISO guys in points per possession. You play to your players' strengths. But I think offensively, it's going to be more interesting to see what happens down the stretch here because obviously on the season, were they 17th or 18th or 19th, somewhere there in offensive rating. But the last 10 games, I want to say they're 13th or 14th. So clearly, with Kawhi back, he has helped them almost get back to being a top 10 offense. So if they get to a top 10 offense while not falling out of being a top 5 defense, that's the sweet spot right there to me.
Yeah, I think I don't think they need to like reinvent the wheel so much. I am in favor of sort of like a return to fundamentals and maybe a teardown. We talked about sort of how there was a lot of guys on the Clippers roster that are sort of like one specific tool. And I do think that like offensively, that means that you sort of have to broaden how you play to adjust for a lot of people. And like what I see with these couple of additions here is like Bogey very much filling a role that the Clippers have kind of traditionally had. You can pop him into like old Luke Kennard sets. You can certainly use him in ways that they would use Norm off ball with that second unit. And then in Ben Simmons, I mean, I think that he's such a great fit because you can run a lot of the same stuff that you run for Zoo for him. So I think that there can be sort of like a simplification and a return to basics that I do think could just make things a little bit more direct. And I think that the Clippers would sort of benefit from that.
You know what does concern me about the schedule here as soon as they get back? 3 of the first 4 teams they face are top 10 in pace. That would be the Bucks, that would be Indiana and Chicago. I worry about the cumulative effect that could take when you're
It's
talking about an early 3 and 4.
it's a lot of games. Yeah. That
Ooh,
that first game back is the 20th, I want to say, and then
it's whatever next Thursday is. Yeah,
uh,
February 20th, you're right.
so they have that one. I think they have
2 days off.
2 days off, and then a 3 and 4. So
Yeah.
that is definitely going to be that. I mean, that's definitely going to be a stretch to watch for, especially if they need to go 4-2, as you're thinking.
Yeah, and teams that are playing fast there, so there could be some tired legs early on, or maybe it's a blessing in disguise to get those fast teams right out of the gate after you have a bunch of time off. I don't know. The schedule's gonna be brutal. We've known this all season. We know how it goes with the Clippers. They just have to find a way. And if Kawhi is ramping things up or feeling even better, like we're 15 games in now. And so far, Kawhi says he feels great. Like that's a blessing in itself that there's
Yeah,
been no setback, knock on wood. Of course, speak of the devil, I just, I have a lot of concern, of course, over the knee swelling, and so far, so good. That's something right there we should probably acknowledge 15 games in. That everybody talking about, when they lost 3 games in a row, the sky's falling stuff I mentioned earlier. It's like, guys, they're in good shape. They're 8 games above 500. They've had Kawhi for 15 games. He hasn't had a setback yet. We're doing all right here, I think.
yeah, we're looking pretty good. We're looking pretty good. Where with All Star Weekend going on, where do you think Norm finishes in this 3-point competition?
I mean, number
One.
one. Like he's he's so damn competitive. I'm excited for this. We saw some of the practice footage of him getting up shots, and he looks good. So I hope he's not putting too much pressure on himself. And I think I'm going to live stream watching it later tonight on Clippers Talk, but I hope he's not putting too much pressure on himself because that's where things could go wrong. Where Coach Lewis had to tell him, like, it's okay. You're going to miss sometimes. You don't got to be so hard on yourself, but he's a maniacal worker.
Yeah. You think James Harden gets a strip in the All Star game? He adds an All Star strip to the Harden strip club.
I mean, if they're playing a level of defense that they should be to make it a competitive game, yeah, I hope so. That's all I want to see. I don't know. I don't even understand some of the format. I'm watching the Rising
I don't
Stars
even bother,
contest.
baby. I don't even bother trying to keep up.
Yeah, it's a moving target with how they're doing this All-Star game and switching things up. Is it still the Elam rules, but with I think that what they're trying to do is, and I saw this last night too, where they had 3 games. 4 teams leads to 3 games. 2 teams play each other, and then the winner of that game play each other. So the hope is, I think the NBA is saying, we're bound to get 1 good game if we have them playing 3 on Sunday. That's what I think they're going with.
I don't know if that holds, but I like the thought process, I suppose.
Yeah.
Do you have any parting thoughts on All Star Weekend, or where the Clippers are at heading in, or where they need to be coming out?
I just want to commend them again for that level of focus heading into the All-Star break. Like
Yeah.
you touched upon it earlier too. That speaks to something about this team. That is not nothing to be down 20 in Utah and not pack it in. To be down 16 with like 16 minutes left and not pack it in. That was I don't know, a character building type of win, something born out of this type of win.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I took a long way to get to where I eventually was going the entire time. I don't know. I like the competitive edge this team showed against Utah in that game because you could say, oh, why were they down 20 to begin with, Adam? I don't know. They hit 9 effing threes in the first quarter. The record's 11. They hit 9. It was
They
insane.
shot 40% as a team. Like I think there were only like 3 Jazz players who weren't in double digits. It was,
Yeah, Filipowski had his best game as an NBA player so far. They played well. They were playing to win too. So the important part is the Clippers gutted it out when they needed to, and I think that bodes well for what to expect from this team in the future when the going gets tough. We saw them just lose 3 in a row. They made up for it. They won 3 straight, and a game where you can make all the excuses in the world to lose, and they didn't lose it.
Yeah. That being said, when the going gets tough for you or your friends or people you know, go ahead and check out Clips and Dip. You can tell your friends and family to do that wherever they get their podcasts. If they happen to listen over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can leave a little rating or review. Really helps us out. The best way to check out the show is obviously over on youtube.com. That's at Clippers Podcast. But hey, however you listen, however you watch, we appreciate you. Adam, we got to do it before we send these fine folks out of here. What's our shining light? What's our positive thing that we're gonna end on?
Oh, I spoke about so much positivity already. I should have
It's
saved
not enough.
Okay, I got something. So over the last 10 games, this is a crazy number. Teams are shooting their best 3-point percentage against the Clippers. Over the last 10 games, teams have been shooting 40.
This is a positive?
Hold on. Stay with me. Teams have been shooting 40.4% from 3 over the last 10 games, and that's against the Clippers. It is the worst percentage or the best percentage, depending on how you look at it, if you're the opposition. They've been lighting them up. But I've looked into a lot of the numbers, and they're giving up the same amount of open threes and wide open threes, and I think it's just fluky shooting. It just happens sometimes. Like, you're on the wrong end of it. I think at times they've been on the right end of it where they're not closing out and guys are just missing against them. But the point is to be 6-4 over a 10-game stretch where teams have been shooting over 40% against you. That is very rare. Like, they should be 4-6 at worst, not at worst, but at best. Like, and somehow they're 6-4 over that time. Like, that tells you, because their defensive rating over the last 10 games isn't 29th. It's still, I think, 13th. So they're doing things right in all these other areas. There's just some shooting that's gone against them, but it hasn't broken
still winning.
them. Yeah.
That's great.
That's impressive.
All right. We'll take it. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. And as Charles always says, let's go Clips.